Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm super happy of joining you today. My name is Arturo. I'm a developer advocate at Unity Technologies, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have questions about this or any other Unity-related topic. Today, we're going to talk about version control systems for video games. In particular, we're going to be talking about Plastic SCM. So you know that video games are complex pieces of software that require thousands of files to work. Games are developed by teams that are usually between one person and literally thousands of people, all working together, sharing files and files that are usually large. And talking about teams, many teams of people collaborate on the same project at the same time. And there is a need to have a centralized place with all the code, texture, materials, audio files, etc. There are more challenges, of course, but for these ones, the solution is to use a robust, flexible version control system. So these are the takeaways for the presentations. At the end of the session, you will understand version control systems and why you should be using one, which is important. You will have a basic understanding of Plastic's SCM workflows and concepts, and you will be able to use Plastic SCM as your version control system for your projects. I hope this is good. I hope this is fun. So let's start with a couple of definitions. The first one is, what is a version control system? And in reality, a version control system is just a tool that allows game developers to manage their changes in their code and assets through time. Usually, it's backed up in a cloud server. Now, when I say game developers, I mean literally everyone who collaborates in the creation of the game. It can be an artist, it can be a designer, a level designer, a programmer, etc. Now, why should I use one? And there are various reasons. But the real question should be, why shouldn't you be using one? But if you're still wondering, I will encourage you to ask yourself the next questions. Are you facing usually complex merges in your code or projects? Do you need a backup of your project? Do you work on a team, whether it's on the same location or distributed? And if you need continuous integration with a build system. If you said yes to these questions, then probably you need a version control system. If you said no to all of them, you still probably need a version control system. So what are the options? And there are multiple version control systems out there. There's Git, there's Perforce, there's SVN, Mercurial, and Plastic. And these are just some of them. The important thing to evaluate when choosing one is that the version control system helps you have better workflows and not the other way around. So for this definition of which one to use, you can also use these questions like how easy it is for non-programmers to use, right? Because games are not only created by programmers. So if you want an artist to have access, if you want a designer to have access to the source of the project, then how easy it is for them to actually have access to it. How flexible it is, how it fits into your specific development workflow. How well does it manage large assets, such as textures, videos, and models? And this is important because in games, we're usually working with large files, with large type of assets. So how easy it is to manage them, but also to download and upload them quite sometimes per day. Okay, so let's talk about Plastic. Plastic is a full version control stack that is designed for branching, merging, speed, visualization, and ease of use. It was acquired by Unity earlier this year, so let's jump into the inners of Plastic. So why would I use Plastic? And there are many reasons, but here are just some of them. Plastic is great for large projects and big files. You can have literally huge assets that are megabytes in size, gigabytes in size, and Plastic will handle them perfectly. It's also very flexible to configure. That's why they called it Plastic, because it's so flexible, which is another cool thing about Plastic. It's amazing for speed on uploads and downloads. Of course, it depends on your connection, etc. But built-in speed was built in into Plastic, and it was developed with that in mind. There are plugins and integrations for Unity and Unreal, so you can use Plastic within the engine. You can use a plugin for that. It's free to start. You don't have to pay. You can get started up until 3 free users. So it's great to also evaluate. And also comes with a simplified workflow for artists, which is called Glue-on Mode. And we're going to discuss Glue-on Mode in just 1 second. So, Glue-on Mode. Glue-on Mode, it's a simple workflow of working with Plastic. It's the same thing. It's the same version control system. It only changes a couple of things on how it presents the options and the workflows to particularly artists. It's great at handling large binaries. You will be working with files that are usually large because they are usually probably the raw files. So it handles them perfectly. It allows you to lock files. There might be times when you cannot work on a file and someone else to be working on the same file because the merging it's not easy, or might be impossible to do in a straightforward way. So you can put a lock on a file and then prevent anyone else in your team to modify that file at the same time. You can also pick up files easily, and I'll show you how to do this, which basically means if I just need to have on my computer these assets, I don't need the entire project, I don't need the source code, then I can simply just pick up some files and use them and download them into my machine. I don't need to pay the price of storing the rest of the project if I'm not going to be using it. Okay, so I want to start with some concepts about Plastic, because if you're new to version control, it's important to know them. And if you have used other version control systems, then probably you want to know like differences or what's the naming convention here. So that's what we're going to be doing here. So these are the concepts. There are more, but for that, I will encourage you to go to the Plastic website and get this book in the form of a PDF. It comes with all the information. It was developed. It was written by the creator of Plastic. So, best source of information out there. So, okay. A check-in basically is the action of sending changes to our repository. We also have the concept of a change set. So every time you check in something, you will create a snapshot of your changes in time. So that's a change set. Update, it's the process about updating or downloading, the content from a repository to your local working copy. So that's updating. When I update the project, that means I'm downloading the content from the repo to my local project. Now, the concept of branch, which also exists in other version control systems, is basically a parallel version of our code. You can have as many branches as you want. In fact, this is something that Plastic encourages you. There's this pattern called one branch per task. So potentially you can have one branch for every task that you have in your task management system. So let's say I want to make a new update to the gameplay code. I create a branch that is called gameplay update, and then I work on that branch. Now, every Plastic repository starts with a main branch. You can rename it, but basically is the central timeline of your development. Of course, you can have, and you should have more than one branch, but yeah, that's the main branch, and you can rename. The repository is the place where all your versions, all your branches, all your merges are stored, etc. And finally, there is this concept of a workspace, and the workspace is the directory where in your computer the project is downloaded too. So you will be using these to make modifications, to work with, and then once you make those changes, you will be checking in them into the repository. Okay, so now let's talk about what we call a perfect workflow. And as I was mentioning, in Plastic, well, you can do basically anything you want and adapt to your workflow. One recommendation that we give is that, again, you have one task in your management system, you create one branch, then you do the code review or the review to make sure that everything works, that everything is perfect. Then you merge that into the main branch, basically. You do the test and then you deploy. And of course, you will be repeating these over and over for the multiple tasks and branches that you have in your project. Also, Plastic allows you to have two layout modes of working. One is centralized mode and the other one is distributed mode. Let's briefly discuss them, and my recommendation is always to keep it simple. If you find a way to work in a simpler way, go that way. You don't have to complicate things if not necessary. So centralized mode, basically this means that you will have your workspace, where we will be making our changes, where we will be modifying stuff. And then there's a central repository somewhere. So I will be checking in my changes from my workspace directly to the central repository. Whenever there are changes in the repository and I want to bring them into my workspace, then I will be updating. And this is centralized mode. It's pretty straightforward. Just directly communicating. Now, there's another mode, which is the distributed mode. The distributed mode basically has like an intermediate repository. So I have my workspace. There's another repository that might be a local repository where I will be checking changes and updating from. But also from that repository, there's another repository that it's a remote repository that has to be synchronized. So I will be pushing and pulling the changes from and to the other repository. So you can see here that I could be working on my machine, having a local repository as well on my machine, working there. And once I feel that I want to push everything into the remote repository, I can do that. And you can, as a team, you can have mixed modes, mixed layouts. So I can work on a distributed mode and my colleague can work in a centralized mode. And that's absolutely possible. Now let's jump into the actual demo, into how to install Plastic, how to use it, and let's start. So the first step is to create an account. It's pretty straightforward. You just go to the Plastic SCM website, you register your personal details, you create all the details that you need. If you already have a Unity ID account, you can use that Unity ID to sign up. So that will be pretty easy. You just need to create an organization with a unique name. And also to define a data center. Where do you want your cloud repository to be located at? In this case, I'm in the US, so I'm going to go with the US one. And you can select if you want to use, you want to force encryption or not. And then that's it. You're ready to use Plastic. The next step is to actually download the client. You go to the Plastic website, you go to the download section, and you download the cloud edition. In this case, that's what we're going to use. We have a client for Windows, Linux, and Mac. And of course, anyone in the team can be working on a different operating system, and everyone can be collaborating in the same project. So that's it. You install it, you follow the wizard steps, and you're ready to go. Now let's open Plastic for the first time and configure it for the first time. So I'm going to open the Plastic configuration wizard. I'm gonna enter the credentials that I just used to create my account. I log in and you see that I'm part of several organizations. I'm going to choose the one that I just created. I join and I'm going to launch in the regular mode. So you can have centralized or distributed mode. In this case, I'm probably going to stick to centralized mode. I have to choose the repository, the workspace name, and the location of my repository. Now, this is the Plastic client. You see that since I joined a repository that already exists, I simply need to update. Remember, update is this process of downloading whatever is on the repository into my workspace, the local copy on my machine. Plastic is pretty fast. I fast forwarded here the speed, but still it took around 3 or 4 minutes to download the entire repository, which is around 2 gigabytes in size. On my connection. Of course, it depends on multiple things, but it still blows my mind on how fast Plastic is. So yeah, now we have the repository configured. There are multiple views here in the Plastic client, the workspace explorer. There are the pending changes window. I don't have any pending changes. The branch explorer. You can see that this project already has some different branches happening. And yeah, it's basically it. You can have multiple repositories and the client can manage them very, very, very easy. Okay, now let's start with some modifications. So I'm going to create a branch because I want to make some changes to my project. I want to change some render features in my game. So I right click on the tip of the main branch. I create a new branch. And you can see now that the home icon went to the new branch. I'm now working on a separate branch. So I open my Unity project. I'm going to make some modifications to the render features. I'm using the universal render pipeline. So I want to apply some effects, kind of like post-processing effects. So I go to my data folder, universal render pipeline, and I will choose these rendering assets. And you can see that I applied some effects to it. It looks different. That's what I'm working on. Remember, we created that branch based on that task. I also want to maybe deactivate one of these render features. Yeah, it looks okay. So you can see if I go to my pending changes window, I already have some changes to check in. So I make a comment, a descriptive comment saying that I activated the outline effect, etc. And I check in those changes. So now I don't have any pending changes. That's great. You can see now that my branch has those changes and I go back to Unity. I make some modifications and I check in another change. I basically activated this retro filter now. I check in the changes again. If I go to my branch explorer, you can see that I have two change sets into my main branch. So I want to go back to the main branch. So I right click there and I say switch to that change set. And now I want to bring my changes to the main branch. Basically, I want to merge the changes to the main branch. So I right click on the change set that I want to merge from. And I see that there are no conflicts. Everything looks good. I just need to apply the changes. Now you can see that we're back to the main branch and we brought the changes that we just made in our project. And this is usually the whole process. Remember, you create a new branch, you check in your changes, and you can create multiple check-ins. That's actually good. You don't have to wait for many changes to accumulate to actually check in. Then you go back to your main branch and you merge and test. Okay. Of course, this is a very simple example, but yeah, and we didn't have any conflicts in merging, etc. So all good on that end. So now let's assume that someone in our team, someone working remotely, made some changes, right, to the project. And you can see here that on the upper right corner of my screen, I have this update option telling me that there are some pending changes that I have to update. So that's what we're going to do. Let's update the workspace. You can see that there's another change set ahead of where we are at right now. So I'm going to update. I can make a div. Before actually bringing the changes, I can see what happened. And Plastic comes with very powerful tools to div and resolve conflicts. So you can see here that we are just, someone else on my team just refactor the code. Everything looks good. So I don't have to basically resolve anything. Everything will automatically merge amazingly. So I update the workspace. Now I'm at the tip of the branch, of the main branch again. Everything is cool. And the changes now there are no pending changes. But if I go to the change sets view, you can see that I can now see the new change set that someone else created in my team. And this is the other part of the project where someone else in my team makes a change and I have to bring that change into my working copy. So now let's talk about Glue-on Mode, this simplified workflow of working with Plastic. I'm going to launch the Plastic client. Same thing, same credentials. I'm going to select my org. Now I'm going to launch Glue-on Mode. So you can see that starting here, there is a simplified view. I just need to select which repository I want to be working on. In this case, I want to work on boat attack. And of course, if you're part of one or more organizations, you can select the organization and then the project within that organization that you want to actually be working on. So I want boat attack. That's where my working directory or workspace will be located at. Recommendation again is to have it well set into your hard drive. And yes, here's what I want to have it. Looks good. And now this is a glue-on mode. You know, we have less options. Less options is more optimized for artists. You can see that we have the same client, but with a different workflow. You can see that here are the change sets. I have my workspace explorer. Right now, I don't have anything there. And what I need to do is basically tell Plastic Glue-on, like, I want these assets to be added to my working copy. So I configure it. I select all the assets that I want. In this case, I need the entire Unity project. So I choose all of them and I apply. As soon as I do that, I'm picking up those files. So Plastic is downloading those files into my machine. I fast forwarded this video, but again, it took just 3 to 4 minutes to download almost 2 gigabytes of data. It didn't ask me if I was using like large files or anything. It just simply worked, which is great, especially if you want to have this simplified workflow, right? You don't want an artist or you don't want a designer to be confused by so many options, and even a programmer, right? But yeah. So now I have the entire project on my machine. There are no incoming changes. There are no change sets. I haven't done anything, but now I have the project on my machine. So the next step is to install the Unity plugin. We're going to be working with the Unity plugin. So I go to the asset store. I search for Plastic SCM and I download and import the Unity plugin. We also have a plugin for Unreal in case you're using Unreal. So I import it. And as soon as Unity is done importing the plugin, you will be able to go to Window and open the Plastic SCM window. Since we are using Glue-on mode, we have launched with the Glue-on version of the Plastic plugin. You can see here that we have some pending changes, basically because some files changed, but this is also a simplified view of what is going on. We can open Glue-on from within the editor as well, which we will be doing in a second, but let's start by making some changes and checking them in. So in this case, you can see that I have my project again. and I have some files that I want to change. So this is a tutorial screen. Maybe I open it, I edit that. I probably want to add a filter here. Nothing too complex. Maybe I think this looks better. And yeah, I'm going to save this file. And then if I go back to Unity and the Plastic plugin, you see that there are some pending changes there. And in particular, the one that I just modified, that texture. So I'm going to create a message for my check-in, and I'm going to check in the changes. And that's it. I don't have to worry about anything else. It just worked. Now those changes are in the repository. And this is usually how you're going to be working. I just launched the Plastic Gluon client, and you can see that in the change sets, there is my latest change. So everything looks good. That's pretty much all you have to do. And again, you simply modify things, you create you check them in, and that's it. You repeat over and over. Now, let's take a look at the other side of the conversation. Someone on my team made some modifications to the project, so I now want to have them in my local workspace. So you can see that the Plastic plugin is telling me there are some incoming changes, and I want to see the differences. So I right click and I want to see the image differences, because they modified also another texture for a menu or for a tutorial. And you can see that we have a couple of interesting visualization tools to see what changed between one and the other. So this is very powerful. Everything looks good. I simply update. Now I have the changes in my working copy as well. So I go to change sets, and you can see that the latest change that someone else on my team added is already here. So that's it. That's pretty simple. I haven't dealt with command line commands, etc. You can if you want, but in this case, we want to focus on making the game, on making the changes, and not necessarily on managing a repository if we don't want to, of course. Perfect. So now another thing, and we were talking about picking up files. You can see that this project is almost 2 gigabytes in size, and maybe I'm an artist and I just need access to textures. So there's no point in me having the entire project there. So what I can do is to pick up some files. So let's say I just care about textures. So in this case, I just need Plastic to download the textures in this particular project. So I can simply choose the textures, and in fact, not all of them, just these ones. And you can see that now, if I open the Windows Explorer, I will just have these textures in my folder. I don't have the rest of the project because I'm not going to be dealing with the rest of the project. Of course, if you need to open the Unity project, you will need to pick up all the files, at least the assets, packages, and project settings. But if not, then there's no point in you using a lot of disk space. Because in some cases, the projects will be extremely large, right? And not everyone in the team needs all of the assets. The next step is to check out log files. So again, the use case is I'm working on, let's say, a model and a 3D model, and I don't want anyone else on my team to be modifying the same file, the same asset, because it will be impossible to merge or too difficult, or simply we don't want that to happen. So Plastic allows you in a very simple way to check out and log files. How do you do that? You go to your Workspace Explorer. Let's say I want to log and check out this FBX file. So I simply right click. I say that I want to log and check out. I'm going to create a rule first. In this case, I just want to log maybe this particular asset or every asset that ends with an FBX extension. Now you can see that the status changes from controlled to checked out. And no one will be able to make modifications unless I undo the checkout or I check in the changes, which is pretty useful. You won't be able to make modifications to the same asset at the same time. Awesome. So that's it for this session. I really hope that it was informative. I hope that it was useful, and I hope that it was fun. Let me know if you end up using Plastic. Please go to the Plastic website, grab it. It's free. You can get started and explore if it's the right solution for your project, for your team, for your company. There's a lot of documentation on the Plastic website. We have a lot of videos. We have a lot of resources for you to learn about Plastic. And also you can get the Plastic SCM plugin for Unity, which is currently in beta. So thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of your Unite and hope I can see you in person sometime in the future. So thank you.